Good afternoon and good evening to everyone joining us from around the world for this webinar on UK university entrance, providing a unique insight into UK university admissions and life. It's a pleasure to welcome so many of you from around the world, from around about 36 different countries, which in many respects tells us an important point, and that is that education, wherever it is in the world, is such an important part of our planning for our children and for students that we are responsible for. So it's a pleasure to have you joining us via Zoom, via Facebook and via YouTube. And it's a pleasure to also welcome onto this webinar Richard Judd, who is the lead for university entrance at the English Education and Constellation Group. And we'll be asking Richard a wide range of questions today about what the process and the journey looks like in terms of getting into the best UK universities and what to look for as you go on that journey, either as a family yourself or with your children. For so many of us over the past year, education has been disrupted in a way that we could never have imagined. And so as countries start to emerge from the pandemic at different stages, one of the key features for all of us is, where can we find stability? Where can we find certainty for our children and for the students that we're responsible for? And I'm very confident that from what you will hear and understand today, that not only UK schools, but for the purposes of this webinar, UK universities will provide that certainty and will provide that continuity and that stability that we're all looking for. And going forward, will also provide that springboard into a very successful career and hopefully life in general. It's my great pleasure to introduce Richard Judd to you today. Richard is vastly experienced in both careers guidance as well as university guidance, and he will be available for consultations following on from this webinar. If you do have any questions as we go along, please do pop them into the questions channel and we will try to answer them as we go along. I know that Richard also has some slides that he would like to share with you just by way of illustration. But thank you very much, Richard, for joining us today. It's a pleasure to see you again. And just to kick off the webinar, I suppose the question on a lot of people's minds over the past 18 months is, how have UK universities responded to the global pandemic vis-a-vis international students? And what has the general experience been for an international student enrolled at a UK university?
Brilliant. Thank you. It's may I add my welcome again for this afternoon, this evening, as you're listening to this broadcast. British universities, like across the world, I think, had a range of instant responses to the pandemic, particularly as it rolled out across the UK. But I think we can be very proud of the majority of our universities in terms of their responses to. I've been in touch with a number of students spread out across the UK, and none of them felt that they were left in the lurch. In terms of that, I think that was positive. I think some universities were quicker at taking on board new technologies to help them continue the education process. Some universities really supported their students as they remained in country. Other universities supported them by distance. So while there has been variation, there's no doubt about it. I think particularly as the pandemic rolled on, the quality of the care has rose to the occasion. And in a sense, now we're in a very good position in terms of some of those universities that perhaps were a little bit slow in technological development have certainly caught up in these last 18 months.
Great, thanks, Richard. And delving straight into it, I mean, what would you say are the distinctives of a UK degree? What are the qualities that we would want to demonstrate to anyone watching today?
Right. I think, again, some of you may be very familiar with the UK system, some of you less so. I think I think the easiest way to think about the UK system of universities is to compare it to the American system, because in a sense they are equal and opposites in every sense. So the UK and America occupy, if you like, the extreme distinctives. So for a start, in the UK, pretty much every university is a publicly funded university. There are a small number of private universities. In the UK, you're going to be applying for the subject. You're not applying to a university to become part of a university community, which is the vast majority of the American system. You're actually being assessed on your competence to be a student and be successful on a particular subject course. So you are applying for a major right from the beginning. And likewise, there's no common curriculum at all in the UK. If I choose to study economics, that's all I can and probably will study for my entire 3 years. We operate a 3-year system. So the UK distinctive is depth, not breadth. If you know what you want to study, you will spend 3 or 4 years just studying that one subject. We are generally a single honours setup. You can do joint honours and you can do majors and minors. We don't use that language, but it's available in the UK. But generally, people are choosing one subject to study at depth. Okay, about 20% of our undergraduates are international students. In some of our cities, that may grow up to into the early 30s. But generally, the average is 20% of undergraduates. So, and again, drawing from right across the world. So it is very clear that you can have a very globalized experience. So not only are you coming to the UK to learn about, if you like, UK culture, you're also going to be exposed to an incredible global community in our campuses as well. As I've said before, we operate 3 years for our university courses. The first year is often very foundational in terms of bringing everybody up to the same level. And predominantly, those will be core modules. You won't have a lot of choice of modules within your subject area, say, of economics in the first year. When you move into the second year, suddenly your options are opened up widely. And in the third year, the majority of your subjects will be optional. So we have quite a flexible system of education in the UK, going through modular from year 1 through to year 3. If you're doing a professional qualification, there may be slight limits on that, purely because you're having to gain sort of a national standard. But UK universities are quite independent and can choose their own curriculum alongside professional qualification requirements if they're validating those alongside. It's worth noting that we don't do a grade point average in system, that when you graduate with one of 4 passing grades. So that's slightly different from America as well. And like I said, the first year, you will be assessed on that, but it generally won't count towards your final grades. Often it's 1/3 of your final grade is based on your second year and 2/3 on your final year. And at the more academic institutions, we're going to be quite test heavy. The most extreme perhaps would be, say, Oxford and PPE, where your grade will be fundamentally based on about 8 exams in your final year, based on your previous 2 years' work. Okay.
Thanks, Richard. And Richard, I mean, we take it for granted because we've been brought up in the system, and for us, it's common practice. But given that the UK, along with the US, Canada, possibly Australia, New Zealand, are seen as very high quality higher education landscapes, I mean, what value does that have in terms of what students come away with from having a university setup that's been around for a considerable amount of time and it has a very strong reputation? What benefit does that actually give to someone looking at this for the very first time? Because it's a bit of an intangible, really.
I think there's an idea of confidence in the curriculum that you're presented with. In other words, here is a system that is confident in itself, that has been around a long time, that has clearly allowed people to progress through it and into careers, and very successful careers. So there's a lot of confidence that the universities and the setup of the universities, they know what they're doing in terms of preparation. The UK, particularly when I went to university over 30 years ago, vocation wasn't a strong element of the courses back then. But in the last 20 years, and particularly the last 10 years in the UK, vocational side of things and employability and those aspects of career path progression are fundamentally now at the center, even at our top research universities, as well as our more vocational universities as well. So I think that's a fundamental in terms of that. And our focus in the UK, again, our huge distinctive is that we're very much into independent learning. Students who come to the UK will have more time outside of lessons. They'll have less teaching contact hours slightly than, say, in America or on the continent. And that's deliberate, because what we're trying to do is not just focus on subject knowledge, but focus on skills and independence, resilience, creative thinking, etc., is at the core heart of our top universities.
Thanks. Great. Thanks, Richard. So, Richard, if we start to break down the journey that a family and a student would take in considering UK university entrance and actually starting the process, what does that actually look like in terms of the activities, and what are the timeframes around that process?
Brilliant. Okay. So let me just share something with you at the moment. There we go. So in terms of the UK university timeline, the actual application cycle I'll come back to, but in terms of preparing, we're talking really the last 2 years of high school is an opportunity, and some people will start a little bit earlier than that, thinking forwards and projecting forwards in terms of what they're looking for in selecting universities, in selecting subject choices. Again, the subjects you choose in your high school, in your IB or A levels, they're going to determine the options you have going forward. So important choices made as you go into your junior year in some schools, what we call year 12 or 11th grade, are quite fundamental to help shape what options you have going forward in the UK, because we're subject focused, not university focused. So that decision is quite important as you move into junior year, if you're entering into something like the IB or your APs as well, what subjects you're going to study for AP and when you're going to do them, okay, is quite crucial in terms of that. But the general cycle is preparation will start in what we call the junior year or lower sixth, year 12. And that's going to be building up your knowledge of the subject you want to study. And particularly at strong universities, academic universities, going well beyond the curriculum, exploring that subject independently beyond the curriculum, because we're expecting you to be an independent learner and to be a self-starter, self-motivated. But in terms of the cycle of application, we do have a common application system. It's called UCAS. You can apply to up to 5 universities for most subjects. For medicine, you can only put 4 medical schools in, the same for vet. If you're applying to Oxford or Cambridge, it has to be an either or. You can't apply to both of them. So our cycle starts generally halfway through the junior year, halfway through what we call year 12, where you can register for UCAS and start putting in personal information. But you can't actually send your application until the start of September of your senior year, of your last year at school. Now, applications are often sent through your school, so your school cooperates with this, or you can send it independently, but you will need a reference attached electronically by your school. So the timeline is generally students will submit their UCAS applications generally in October if they're doing early applications for medicine, for veterinary, for dentistry, or for Oxford and Cambridge. You have to apply by the 15th of October. But apart from that, every other university, it's from the 26th of January from 2022 onwards. They've changed the timeline on that. And it doesn't matter if you apply in November or in January, the law states that you must be treated fairly, and all applications before the 26th should be treated equally. Now, universities then have time to process your application. And again, by UK law, they have to reply to you by March, the end of March. You will then have a chance to reflect on this. And then by the beginning of June, you'll have to choose your firm or first choice university, and you can have an insurance or a backup university as well. Now, most offers that you receive from universities will be conditional on grades that you achieve on graduation. And so they'll be conditional until you communicate your grades and your results. So in the UK, our main results day this year is actually slightly earlier than normal. It's the 10th of August. So that's when all A-level results and Scottish higher results will come through. So that's the general cycle of application. But the work starts a lot earlier on that, particularly as I was explaining in terms of this breadth of knowledge, this academic activities well beyond the curriculum. You see that big lump in the middle of this slide. And what that is showing your passion, your interest in the subject, showing your independence. And that's where a lot of international students come unstuck, because they don't prepare early enough for these highly competitive universities. We sometimes call it super curricular material. And it's these sorts of things. So what sort of things is a student doing outside of their school curriculum, on their own, out of their own interest? Have they taken something from their school curriculum and taken it further? Have they written anything for publication inside school or beyond? How are they demonstrating their enthusiasm, their curiosity, their open-mindedness, their analytical skills, their self-motivation, their hard-working, independent nature? That's what the top British universities are looking for. Oh, I think you're on mute, John.
Thank you, Richard. And just to remind everyone that's watching, we'll be sending you a recording of this webinar and obviously those slides at the conclusion of this event. So don't worry if you couldn't take all of that information in. There's a lot to take in. You will get a copy in due course. So Richard, just to add on to that cycle that you just described there, because this might be slightly alien to some international families, but will universities accept students on the basis of just their applications, or will there be an interview at any stage? And how does that differ from university to university?
It will totally depend on university to university and course to course. So anything to do with the health sciences, so the medicine, the veterinary, physio, dentistry, those sorts of radiography, all of those types of courses will require an interview. And that's partly because you're client focused in terms of patient care. So they're judging your ability to interact with people as well as just your technical knowledge. Yeah. The vast majority of other courses will not interview. It will all be taken down on basically 4 pieces of information. And those 4 pieces will be your actual or predicted grades. So in the UK, we operate under a predicted grade. What does the school project forwards to graduation? So it will be your actual or predicted grades. It will be a reference from the school, which will be focusing in on your academic personality, your profile, not your personality in terms of if you're a nice person or you're very charitable, but what do you do in the classroom? What is your academic rigor like? You'll write your own personal statement as well in terms of why you think you're a good fit for the course. So those 3 pieces are the standard. Some universities will have interviews. So Oxford and Cambridge always interview because they're trying to work out whether you're a good fit for the style of teaching that they have. If you're going to particular universities for particular courses, occasionally Imperial will interview for certain courses and things like that. And so that interview stroke testing is that 4th element. There will be some tests for some universities and for some specific courses.
Right. And is there any particular advantage in getting your application in early, or how does that work? Does it?
In theory, by law, there's no advantage of getting anything early before the 26th or the 15th of October, depending upon your deadline. If I'm honest, throughout the years I've been doing it, we find that if you send your application in early and it's a strong one, then you're more likely to hear back a little bit earlier. Most universities operate a rolling review process, which means that they will gather up all the applicants that have come in for maybe the last couple of weeks, and they'll review them at that point. So it would be very rare to hear from a university within about 2 or 3 weeks of actually submitting your application. Some universities will wait till the 26th. So St Andrews used to do this. And so literally you could send it in November, but you wouldn't hear any sooner than anybody else who sent it in on the 25th of January. But I personally feel that there's a slight advantage of getting it out of the way before January. So at the end of that autumn or fall term, submitting it then, you might hear early in terms of that. But it also just allows you to focus in on your studies, because remember, grades are really important for the UK.
Yeah, great. Okay. And just a quick one. If a student was thinking about deferring or taking a gap year, what would your advice be in terms of being open and transparent and, in fact, doing your research in ensuring that a university actually allows that before you even apply?
Well, most universities will allow a student to apply, and you can tick a little box next to the university which says you want to defer your entrance. So instead of sort of waiting for the year and then applying in that year after graduation, the universities will say, we'll offer you a place, but we'll defer you for that 1 year. Now, there may be some people here who have military service that they have to fulfill. And so again, universities are very open to that. I know Singapore has a 2-year requires a 2-year deferment for its military service, because it's 2 years long. Now, many universities, but not all, will allow a 2-year deferral. So you do need to check up on that. But for a 1-year deferral, it's occasionally some maths departments, but only a few of them do not like a deferral for international students. So deferral is a fairly standard practice. I would always advise that tell the university if you're going to defer early, because it helps them in their calculations and in their numbers. If you change your mind, you are allowed to do that within 14 days of submitting your application. And after that, then it's up to the university simply to decide whether it's able to do it. Most of the time, where they can, they will do it. The further away from results day, the easier it is for universities to make that decision. But also, if you do want to do a gap year, defer and apply, because your school may well be available at that time to support you in your application. If you do it once you've left school, sometimes communication with school can be a little bit harder.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. So a slightly more difficult question to perhaps unpick. But in terms of what are the most popular universities, haha, because that's a big question. I mean, how would you advise parents to really get underneath the skin and get into the detail of what is the best university and what is the best course for their child, rather than just relying on anecdote or what they've heard in the past?
Yes, in a sense, best means best for the individual. I have 2 daughters, very different personalities, very different aspirations, very different academic profiles. So what was best for one of my daughters is very different from what is best for my other. And they're both at university now doing very different courses. And their whole experience of university is different. So it does depend, as a family coming together and deciding what is your priority, what is the purpose for going to university. Is it branding? Is it employability? Is it stretching the person creatively? Is it some students are very good, say, at exams, others are much more prefer an essay-based or continual assessment or presentations. Universities have this information available within their websites or within third-party websites to actually unpick that. Again, as internationals, the most popular university for undergraduate internationals is LSE in London, the London School of Economics and Political Science. 52% of students are internationals. Imperial, 48%. UCL, University College London, is 48%. St Andrews up in Scotland, 39%. So it depends on your criteria. Do you want to be with lots of internationals, or do you actually want to push yourself out and go into a totally different experience? So it depends actually on your priority. Obviously, universities publish employability, and we even have something called the Teaching Excellence Framework in the UK, which is slightly experimental, but it judges universities on student satisfaction with the courses, employability, and dropout rates. So that's much more about the student experience rather than just the name of the university. And it's quite surprising actually who scores the gold on that. It's not always perhaps the famous names that are focusing a lot on research rather than undergraduate studies. But clearly there are good strong links. You can actually even see on websites, many universities allow students to take a year in industry. And it's interesting to find out which companies do those universities link their students to. That's another good way of doing it.
I mean, I'd certainly echo your sentiments around having two children as I do, considering different settings. Both of my children academically very similar profiles, but will no doubt end up at very different settings because they are very different people and they've got very different interests and very different ways of learning, and they're interested in different areas as well. And I suppose on that final point, in terms of maybe if you could give us an example, if it's appropriate, there's a great movement, and I think it's a very positive thing in the UK, towards considering the course rather than the university. I mean, could you just give us an example of where there is an outstanding course, but you wouldn't actually, if you considered the university, say that it was one of those that would be considered globally recognized or globally well known at the moment?
Well, I find it quite fascinating. Obviously, there are international league tables. You know, the QS is the standard one, which has a lot of American universities towards the top, perhaps because it's US, I'm not sure. In fact, the British universities this year, it's just been republished for this year, have actually really climbed the league tables in that. So I think there are many universities which are phenomenal and yet do not have global reach. I would say, you know, some of you listening may know about Russell Group universities, which is actually a political lobbying organization of research universities, traditional research universities. There are certain criteria to be members of that, and some universities have deliberately chosen not to be part of that. So we have, say, Loughborough as a university. It's in the middle of the UK. It's in a town. It's incredibly well known for its sport. And so everybody assumes sport is the one thing. We have people who represent the UK. It has huge sporting. For the last 5 years, it's won the university sports in pretty much most sports. But actually, its engineering is phenomenal. Its management is excellent. It's got some really, really good courses. But I struggle to get internationals there because it doesn't have brand. And yet, if you look on our British league tables, our UK ones, it's well up there. Bizarrely enough, St Andrews in Scotland, it is improving on the World League tables, and yet it's probably our third best university behind Oxford and Cambridge. It's a very remote location in a sense, very different. It's not urban at all. And yet, you know, I look at the World League tables and I think, why is it so low? It's just ridiculous. Bath's getting more famous, and Warwick, I know some of you will know Warwick again. But there are these universities. Bath isn't Russell Group. So it's really interesting, I think, what an international perspective. So have a look at where the students are graduating to. You can approach universities and ask the departments, where do your students go on to? And you'll be surprised that actually it's not just Russell Group that get to the top.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Richard. In terms of some of the pitfalls that you've experienced on behalf of international students, obviously applying too late is the obvious one, but what are some of the other pitfalls for international students and families to be aware of and or to potentially mitigate against if they can?
I think it's not just applying too late. Obviously, Oxford and Cambridge and the health, some of the health sciences have an early application. That's definitely true. It's not. It really is. It's not preparing early enough, I would say, is the fundamental problem. I'm dealing with students and families who are contacting me now about an Oxbridge application, and Oxford applications have to be in October the 15th. There will be exams that they'll have to take just after that. They may have to submit work on top of that, and there's an interview to prepare for. And to be honest, my British students have been preparing for Oxford for over 12 months. So it's just an unfair balance. It's just, you can apply, but I'd always recommend maybe a gap year application and actually, you know, apply in your gap year rather than now. So I think lack of preparation, because we are so subject focused, you need to dig into the subject early. You need to live and breathe it. Our application rates, if you want to know our admit rates, we're talking roughly at these top universities, the average is somewhere going to be between 10 to 13% at the sort of main courses that people are interested in, like management, like economics, engineering, some of the sciences and things like that. So it's not a walk in the park. You have to put the work in early. I think that's the crucial thing. Secondly, just be aware again for things like medicine, there's a cap on the number of international students that we will take. It's 7.5% of students can be international studying medicine at our universities in general. The English language qualification can be a little bit interesting. Universities decide for themselves what they'll take. So there is some continuity, but don't assume what one university says, another one will say the same. That happens a little bit of a wobble around IB if you've got IB students. That the IELTS is the easiest one, but again, the detail in IELTS, you'll get conditions on all 4 elements probably. So even if you get the overall score, you must nail the 4 individual components as well. So that's a problem. Preparing for exams is always a big one for me, particularly if you've got exams because of Oxford or Cambridge or Imperial, or you've got to do the medical. You've got to prepare for them well in advance. People don't practice for interviews, I find as well. And that's an interesting one, because interviews will be all different and universities give a lot of information about it. And a slightly odd one would be is for certain subjects, particularly tech, STEM subjects, then there may be extra visa requirements for students coming from certain countries. We have something called the Academic Technology Approval Scheme. And for certain subjects, even at undergraduate level, students coming from certain countries may well have to fill in an extra form and may not be actually accepted by the British government. And that's something which people don't necessarily appreciate. So I think that's something that's worth really thinking through. The earlier you start, then actually the more likely you're going to be successful at these top-end universities.
Great. Thanks, Richard. So we've talked quite a bit about the journey and the process and the how of getting into a UK university. But in terms of when a student finally gets into a UK university, what does the experience look like, and what are some of the benefits, would you say, of a UK university experience in terms of what the university tries to engage and draw out of the students during their time there?
Yeah, well, I think obviously there is time within the academic setting and there's time in the broader university setting. And I think when you're choosing a university, I think it's important to look at both of those. So in terms of we have some very big universities. So our biggest are around 40,000, which will be UCL and Manchester. But our average size is 18,000. And some of our smaller universities and sub-colleges will go down just into a couple of thousand. So again, there will be a different experience depending upon the size of the university. There'll be a different experience in terms of the location of the university. If you're in London, your accommodation may be quite a journey away from the actual institution. The sports fields will be another journey in a different direction. So in terms of feeling part of a community, you may struggle at times because of that. Whereas in a campus university like Bath, I've mentioned already, and Warwick, and smaller universities like St Andrews, then actually it's quicker and easier to feel part of a community because everybody's together most of the time to begin with. But universities, particularly with international students, but also working with national students, are looking to support both their, if you like, well-being, academic well-being, and supporting. So that's why we have this first year as more foundational in terms of bringing people up to a similar level. So for some people, they may find that a little bit more relaxed. For other people, it's a little bit catching up because their international curriculum has missed out gaps that we'd expect. So the university is going to be looking at that. There will be lectures on how to write essays, perhaps. There is a whole support network often around the Learning Institute or the library about how we teach and what we expect from essays and exams in the UK system. But there'll also be an international office which will run support services, particularly for international students with cultural adaptation, academic adaptation. There may be a buddy system where older international students will work in. There's a lot of countries, societies or regional societies in universities that students can join. And also in your accommodation blocks, there may well be, there will be, sometimes we call them hall parents or hall leaders. So there'll be people, senior students who are responsible for the care or just monitoring younger students, new students. So there are definitely academic supports and there's definitely pastoral support.
Great, thanks very much, Richard. And in terms of the outcomes at universities. I mean, clearly some universities will be better placed than others to place students into work experiences or internships and eventually into employability. To what extent can a student do some early research before they consider applying to a university, or once they're at the university, what can they do to enhance their graduate outcomes? And in terms of once they graduate, what does the landscape look like in terms of the ability to look for employment and in terms of the postgraduate visa? How much time do they have to explore other options?
Yeah, well, like I said earlier on, that when I was an 18-year-old, vocation wasn't really thought about at all, and it was just a pure academic route. Whereas now, actually, universities have to publish figures for each course every year in terms of what their students are doing 15 months on from university. Now that can be quite difficult to get international students, but definitely in terms of national students and some internationals, the data is available. So you can research and dig down, particularly to individual courses, and find out student satisfaction and employability rates, and how many students are actually going on to study further at that level. So that is available. That's government national figures that are freely available if you know where to find them. And okay. I spend some of my time just collating that in terms of comparing and contrasting that for different courses at different universities. It's part of the data set that I put together for clients. So that's something. Universities are now running an awful lot of careers advice. It's always been there a little bit, but now it's at the front because they're being judged on it far more by the government. And so it's a priority now. So there's far more staff involved in it. There's far more lots of free advice available on courses, but actually some of it's now actually being brought into the courses themselves. And so in terms of careers advice and progression, there's a huge amount of support now at universities in terms of that. Now, the UK thinks that anybody over 18 is an adult, and therefore they're not going to hold the student's hand that much and gently show them to it. They're expecting students to choose to look for it, because that's part of the British system about independence, resilience. So they'll meet you halfway, but we're not going to do it all for the students. The students are going to have to stand up to it. And again, that's good preparation for employability and for initiative driving and that sort of thing. So data is available, support is available. And like I said, many universities will showcase what their students go on to. And it's always worth, sometimes they'll publish it on their website. Sometimes you can contact them and ask for it. So the data is available. You just have to dig it out.
Yeah, great. Okay, thanks, Richard. And so, Richard, so many of our attendees today are looking to potentially promote UK universities as a wonderful investment to their clients and to their children for the future. If you were sitting in front of an international family right now, advocating UK university and all its benefits and the virtues of, what would you say to them in the current climate about the UK, its higher education landscape, and this enabling effect of higher education to actually transform a student's experience and life chances?
Well, I have two daughters at university, so I think in one sense you can tell that I buy into that system. I think the key issue, and I didn't mention visas after in the last question, so I'll mention that now. The UK system is all fundamentally not simply about knowledge, it's about skills. And those skills are important transferable skills that transcend the subject. So that independence, that curiosity, that teamwork, that report writing, that presentation, which you'll all be assessed on. Those are the sorts of skills that are a natural fit to career progression and employability skills in terms of going forward. So what you're actually getting from a UK university is not simply subject knowledge, but a complete set of employability skills that will open doors to the top companies around the world. So I think that's really important. The UK now has a system in place that even undergraduates can take 2 years for work in the UK, as well as postgrads. Postgrad masters, you can get 2 years post-masters, and PhD students can get 3 years post-PhD. So automatic, you have to apply for it, but it's an automatic 2-year opportunity to work in the UK, to build, if you like, your CV, to build your experience and your profile in terms of that. So I would say that that's another interesting opportunity, particular if you're going to be based, say, in London at a university and looking at the city in terms of gaining some experience. But we have, we have a huge range of global companies in the UK. And also, interestingly, I would argue, don't just think London, think of some of our regional hubs like Manchester, Liverpool, Birmingham. We have some multinational global companies who have regional offices. Everybody rushes to London, which makes it incredibly competitive. I have students who leverage into these global companies through Manchester, through Bristol, or through Liverpool. So we actually have a number of different pathways through the British system to actually access these top international global companies.
Great. Thanks very much, Richard. And in terms of the services that we provide, Richard, if a family were interested in understanding a little bit more about how their children could benefit from our services and more specifically your services, what's the offer from you? What's the general journey that you would take a family on?
In one sense, we offer two services. We offer sort of packages, but we offer by the hour in some respects. So for some people who are very comfortable with the British system, maybe they've had a sibling go through it a couple of years ago, they may be just looking for a little top up, and that top up might just be working on a particular area, like personal statements, for example, or just bringing them up to speed on any changes. And so we offer an hourly rate on that. But what's more common is for people to buy a package, and that package literally is a chunk on the whole process of application. So if I just share, if I go back in and share, let me share, whoops, this one again, and let's just bounce back to here. So the packages deal with the process, and so literally there's a full package which will take you from before the process, introduce you to the process, talk about preparation. That may be particularly 6 to 9 months out, and take you all the way through the process to results day. So that would be our fullest package. But there'll be other packages that maybe just focus particularly on, I do a little package where we focus on university choice against it, and we'll look at your criteria. What is the criteria you're looking for? What is our recommendation? And we'll put together a report and some data for you in terms of why we would recommend certain universities over others. And we'd ask you questions about things like, is brand important? Is location important? Is size important? Etc., etc. So we offer the complete package or subsections of that package, or we offer opportunities just to be quizzed in a way at an hourly rate, that sort of thing.
Right. Okay, thanks very much, Richard. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. We will be sending out a copy of this recording for your information. If you do have any questions or queries, please do get in touch either with me directly or through our info email indirectly, and we can pass those on to Richard. It's never too late to be considering, or too early in some respects to be considering your next steps. So even if it's just an initial chat to understand what it might look like for you and for your children, we would welcome that opportunity to start that conversation as early as we possibly can. But it's been a real pleasure understanding what the options are, because as a parent, ultimately, we simply want to know what are our options for our children. It may not be it's UK universities, but it's good to understand that it is a high quality opportunity. It is within most people's reach. It just requires, like many things, a bit of thought, a bit of planning, and a bit of careful consideration. But whether you're incredibly ambitious and want your child to get into one of the top globally ranked universities here in the UK, or whether you have something that's perhaps more nurturing and perhaps more niche, and as Richard pointed out, like vocational, one of the other strong features of the UK university scene is that there's practically a university for everyone, and we can help with that process of distilling what that university and what that course might look like. So please do get in touch. We'd be more than happy to talk to you and to help you on that journey. We will be following up this webinar with an invitation for you to invite your clients onto the webinar and to ask more detailed questions about the experience for the students. But in the meantime, I hope that this has given you a broad brush approach to understanding what's on offer and how to begin those early stages. Richard, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm very, very grateful. And I hope that in September, once we're up and running, there'll be another opportunity for you to really delve a little bit more into the detail around some of the parents' questions and queries that inevitably we will get. So thank you so much for joining us, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.